what I wanted to do today was just share really around building a high performing team, which is a huge challenge. And within that is how you as leaders can build this really strong, cohesive team that allows you to navigate the challenges of what is the future of the veterinary industry. But I'm the managing director of Agilio Software from a veterinary perspective. So I'm here to support launching some new products in the veterinary sector. That's my little doggy, Bertie, when he was a little bit littler. But I've worked in private equity healthcare buy and builds for the last 22 years. 6 of those were in the Linnaeus journey. So I was the chief operating officer for Linnaeus. From about 8 practices to about 160, and I'm 1/3 of the directors that run a business called Vetpreneur, which is all around helping independent practices thrive. It's a free community. It's for people that want to do startup or growth. And I'm also a certified coach, and so I work with veterinary practices all the time, just helping them with their challenges that they face on a daily basis. So let's have a look about what we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, our mission from an Agilio perspective is absolutely, if we can save you, each of you, 10 minutes a day with the services that we provide, which is integrated technology that sit behind the scenes, then we've done a good job, right? And so Agilio Software are hugely big in the primary care, pharmacy and dental market. We're in thousands of practices, but for veterinary, you might not have heard of us because we've only just started and we're in about 80 practices. And we bought the Colourful CPD platform about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and that forms part of our e-learning proposition. So I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at how you can build a robust framework around positive team culture. I'm going to look at some of the leadership communication styles. If you've ever heard or done DISC, I'm going to just whiz through that. And we're going to really look at some actionable strategies that you can take away with you from this call that are really going to help you in practice. So tangible tools that will really help you make some different decisions. But we're only here for 30 minutes, guys. So it is a whistle-stop tour. And I've tried to make it as punchy and actionable as possible so you can take it back into the workplace. There are 4 key things that I'm going to share with you today. We're going to do a bit about the culture framework. I'm going to talk about effective communication from a leadership standpoint. I'm going to talk about the differences between skills, knowledge and attitude and how they really make a difference and the way that you should adapt some of the ways that you bring people into your team to make that really effective. And then I'm going to give you some tips on how you can manage change, especially as the industry is going through a significant amount of change at the moment. There is opportunity for questions, guys. So if you've got them, then we have Fiona on from Agilio. She's fielding the questions and we can build them in. So please feel free to ask. Let's start with the culture framework. There is a session in January, a webinar in January, which we've got Vet-Led leading, and they're going to talk around building a really positive culture. What I'm going to share with you today is something called the CVF. It's the Culture Values Framework. And what that does is look at how you can create some rigor around the way that you build a framework, so a culture within your organization. And this looks at lots of different areas. So you can see there, it requires that you've got a very clear mission and values. And I don't mean that from a corporate sense. I mean that from, do you understand what your practice's purpose is? Are you really clear about the journey that you're going on? And do your team understand that? You're recruiting now loads of Gen Zs and they care about purpose. They want to work for organizations that have got a very clear mission and they want that to be aligned to their values. So it's very important that you're able to communicate that. And then you as a leader are leading through that lens as you support those individuals within your practice. Another area there is positive work environment. You're going to cover psychological safety in the next session, so we won't cover that, but we will cover communication. And the next one in the framework is something called traditions and rituals. This is really important because where a leader loses credibility is where they set out on a path of structure. So people are very clear about how they're going to be led and managed, and then they fail to follow through or fulfill that structure. So as an example, if you're going to set one-to-ones on a regular basis, then you need to make sure that they don't consistently get cancelled. You need to make sure the framework's clear in how you're going to have those conversations. People like to thrive in an environment where they know what to expect. And if you are inconsistent with your approach, then they won't know what to expect, and that creates a disconnect, and therefore your culture can falter because of that. So creating rituals and routine and a framework within your organization where people are very clear about what to expect is going to be really important to create that framework. Obviously, employee recognition. People want to work for nice businesses where they feel valued, right? Everybody wants that. So think about what you've got that, again, is not ad hoc. You don't just pull it out of the bag on a Friday afternoon, but you've got real clarity about what that means. Professional development. Well, we work in an industry in veterinary where professional development forms a real significant part of that. People really care about their continual professional development. So hopefully you've all got a strategy for that. And then work-life balance. That's an interesting one. People want to make sure that you care about the fact that they're not just here to work, but they need that balance. They need to work hard at work, but also have that opportunity that they're not hindered. And social responsibility. I said earlier about the Gen Z population that you are recruiting now. They care about the environment, and therefore they expect their employers to care just as much. So when you're bringing on that new team member, they'll be looking to see what your strategy is for that. So in terms of the culture framework, what that does is it allows you to start to assess the type of culture that you have in your environment. And there are 4 distinct cultures that we can assess in a business to see the culture in which you work within. The first one is a clan culture. This is very collaborative. It feels like you're working in a family. It's very supportive. This culture is extremely internally focused and has real benefits about making sure that you can mobilize that clan environment to achieve more, go better and go faster together. The negative here is that it can be slow because you're looking for that consultative approach in the way that your culture works, and therefore you can't be agile in making decisions. That's one of the culture areas. The next culture area is something called the adhocracy culture. This is all around innovation. You'll be hearing at the moment there's a few new practices opening up, and they're going for a tech play. They're looking through veterinary as an innovative approach. Let's do it differently. These are building an adhocracy culture. This is all about creating new, standing out and being different. This is very commercial. This is externally commercially focused as a culture. The downside of that is that you could sometimes be way ahead in your innovation to what your practice can actually cope with, and therefore you don't necessarily land what you need to land. The next one is a market culture, and this is about, again, external. This is very focused on numbers and results. These people want to win that work in a culture like this. They're very competitive. Now, I don't tend to see this in the veterinary industry because people are very purpose-driven. Probably clan culture is the biggest one that I see. But there are people that are so focused on their competitive tension or their approach, sometimes they do forget what's really happening within the internal side of the business. So one to watch out for. And the next one is a hierarchical culture. I've definitely seen this. This is one of control. It's internally focused and really does look at processes, procedures, efficiencies. That's the boss looking down into the team, giving a directional order, and people implement. And I think you'll probably find that a lot of practices that you go in, I certainly do, that there's a mixture between a hierarchical culture and a clan culture. So there are the 4 areas of culture. And when you join the webinar in January, you're going to be able to dive more into some of the how on that. But that was just to give you that culture framework. And, if you've got a strategy for each of those elements, you're a good step towards building yourself a really nice culture within your organization. Let's talk about communication, because you can be a great leader in some of the aspects that you do, but if you can't communicate that, you very soon lose the traction about what you're trying to, the impact in which you're trying to get from your team. So if you look out in the environment, you will see lots of documented evidence that says that great leaders are great communicators. And the reason for that is that they have the ability to inspire people, and make sure that they're very clear on their vision and mission. And then they were able to mobilize that through effective communication. So everybody's focused in the same direction. And that's really key, that everybody really understands what's required of them. They have an ability to build trust. They've got clarity and consistency in the message. They are able to foster credibility, and their team are extremely loyal, and therefore they will do anything for them because they believe in the mission that they're trying to achieve. They're good at making sure that they empower others. If a leader keeps everything to themselves, that's really just a manager. Leaders look out to the team and think about how they're nurturing and growing those individuals, and that they give them the opportunity to thrive. And that's really key when you are trying to lead and not manage individuals within your team. They're also great deliverers, great leaders. They know what outcome they need to achieve, and they're driven by the result in the right way. They are able to clearly define what is required, and also ensure that the right tools are there to enable them to execute that delivery. They're not demanding in it, but they're not shying away from the fact that you work in an environment that is commercial and requires delivery. They're very able to resolve conflict, very strong communicators. One of the challenges when I was running large teams, where it always went wrong, was ineffective communication, not being able to diffuse conflict, and therefore conflict grew much bigger when it didn't need to be. And that's all about making sure that you have the right conversations at the right time with the right tone and the right messaging. And they also want feedback. They know that they can't do this on their own. They need the team around them. They want them to feel safe. They invite those ideas, and then they act on them. So people feel like they're able to have that input. So they create environments within the working week or in technology that allows to get that feedback. And then they utilize that information to make the workplace better. So that's all very well documented. But let's have a look at the way that people communicate. And if anybody has done DISC, please drop it in the chat there, and you know what you came out of. I'm a DISC assessor, and I'm a qualified DISC assessment individual, and I test communication behaviours all the time. This isn't about whether you're clever or not. This is just around how you communicate and the impact of that on others. And what we do know, and again, very tested, is that strong leaders are good communicators. And you'll have heard before this golden rule of treat others the way that you'd like to be treated. But the very best leaders use the platinum rule. And the platinum rule says, treat others the way they want to be treated. Because everybody's makeup is different. And everybody looks through a different lens, because that's the way that they have either been nurtured through their working life, or it's just their DNA. That's the way that they're built. And there are 4 different, very distinct communication styles. Each of you has a meld of all of these styles, which I'm going to talk to you about now. But there will be a dominant style that comes out either under stress or in the workplace, that you dial up to be able to manage the situation that you're in. But remember that when I go through this, you will all have a meld or an element of all of these. And listen out for the characteristics here, because I bet you will know by the end of this which one you are. So the first style is a very dominant style. So DISC is an acronym for what we're going to talk about here. So the red colour means that these people are dominant, and they particularly thrive when they are faced with problems and challenges. They are extremely driven individuals that are very driven by outcomes and results. The next area is your influencer. So they are sitting in the yellow box, and these are the people that love to achieve the outcome. So they're also driven, but they like to do that by influencing others. So they love to be surrounded by people. They love those relationships that they get, and they want to do it collaboratively, not like the dominance person who wants to get those results by driving and not really worrying about what they leave behind. The S stands for steadiness. These people are very focused on pace and consistency. So these are one of the slower paces in the DISC styles. So dominance is very make decisions quick. Whether it's the wrong decision or the right decision, it's make a decision. An influencer wants to be more collaborative, so they're getting the people around them. The steadiness person wants to make sure that they do things at the right pace. They want to be consistent in their approach about how they make decisions, and they want some time to be able to think about it. So that's the green, the steadiness. And then we have the blue area, which is the people that are conscientious. So these individuals, again, they act at a much slower pace because what they are requiring is a procedure, and they like to work within the constraints of what's been set out for them. These people are good analysers, very good with data. You actually find a lot of clinical people sitting between the C and the S because they like to make a considered and informed decision before they jump in. Now, there's pros and cons for each of these styles, and each of these styles require you to communicate in different ways to get the best outcome from these people, because the way you speak to a D is going to be different to the way that you speak to an S. Firstly, a D and a C is extremely guarded, so you don't really know what's going on under the surface. They are very, they'll tell you what you want to know. They won't share and what's really going on underneath. Where an influencer and a steadiness person will absolutely share everything with you. They want it to be communicated. So it's really important as leaders that if you can identify people within your organisation that you lead that are Ds and Cs, you're going to have to ask more questions to really find out what's going on, because they're unlikely going to tell you on the first pass. A D and an I is a very direct communicator. So they will, if they tell you how it is, they're going to make sure that they give it straight. They don't fluff it up. They're just going to give you that communication. Whereas a C and an S will be far more indirect. They'll be telling you what's wrong, but they won't really be sharing what's wrong. They'll be going around the houses using different words. So you're going to have to, again, draw this out of an S or a C. An S is famous for saying they're fine when really they're not fine, but they don't want to talk about it. It's your job as the leader to pull that out of them. So a high D, so as I mentioned before, you've all got a meld of all of the styles, but if you've got all of us will have a dominant style, and then under stress, then you will see, so somebody with a high propensity to be in a DISC, you will see these types of behaviours. High risk taker, can be seen as forceful, very decisive, competitive, like to work on their own, but very direct. And I'm sure you can start to form now people that are in your teams or in your environment that you live and work in, that you'll have some high Ds around you. For an I, you're looking at somebody here that's lovely and influential, sociable. They like to understand what's going around by going into the coffee area. They'll have a good chat with you. They'll really understand, and they'll start to be forming how they can make changes if they can see an opportunity. Hugely optimistic, very trusting, and they come across as extremely friendly. And then you have these S's, these high S's in your business. Everybody needs an S in the business, by the way, to help steer the ship, keep it calm. So these are calm, loyal. They've probably been with you a long time. They don't mind repetitive tasks. These are probably people that sit in the back office, do a lot of administration and love the job that they do. They're consistent, they're patient, they're steady, and they're a good asset to the team. All the colours are really good assets as long as you can manage them. And then a C here, you've got very analytical, courteous, very precise, and they love to base all their decisions on facts. Now, with all the positives that I've talked about there are some downsides, right? If you've got a business that's full of Ds, then you will just be driving towards outcomes and you won't be building a really effective culture or potentially get any of the real work done because they're on to the next decision and the infrastructure hasn't been built behind it. A high I is lovely to work with, but sometimes they lack the ability to get really into the detail. So they don't really understand. They don't like the sitting back in a room and creating the actual detail of the plan. They want somebody else to do that for them. An S and a C, they're great for detail and data and consistency in their approach, but they don't work at the same pace that a D or an I will. So if you've got a whole business full of C and S's, then you potentially will you will have a very slow paced environment that you work in. So your role as leaders is to make sure that you understand the types of people that you've got in your organization. You identify where you've potentially got some gaps. And when you go to recruit, you need to make sure that you're looking for that in the recruitment process so you can fill some of those gaps to just enhance the meld of your business further. And as I mentioned there, D and I, very fast paced, C and S, very slow, I and S, very people orientated, a D and a C is very task driven. And these go at conflict, and you've all got a meld of everything in your own makeups. But D and I's get very frustrated with your C and S's because there is a pace challenge here. They want the job to get done, and yet those colours, they actually want time to be able to make an informed decision. There's then a priority challenge because an S and a C, they want to make sure the decision is right, whereas the D and I's just want to get the decision made. So you have this conflict here between each of the colours that then can cause actual conflict within the environment that you work within. A good example here is if you ask an I to come for a one-to-one, they'll say to you, amazing, let me get my notebook, book and pen, and I'm there. You say that to an S and they probably think something serious, that conversation is going to go a different way than it actually is because they need time to plan and prepare so they feel like they can have a real informed one-to-one with you. So that's just one of the ways that you can change the way that you behave as leaders to adapt to their style. Remember, the platinum rule is that you adapt to them and you will get a better outcome from your team. So that's a whistle stop tour on communication, and hopefully you've got some tips from that. Let's now have a look about building your team. And if you don't know already, there's a huge employment law change next year, which makes this really important. What's happening next year is probably since the 60s, there's the largest employee legal change that we've seen in our lifetime, and probably will see in all of our lifetimes. There's some real changes here, such as at the moment, if you employ somebody, you have a 2-year rule that if they don't work out, then you can exit them from the business within 2 years without really any reason. Now, the government has been proposing for the last 18 months that they're going to remove that 2-year rule, and therefore you don't have any time. It looks like they've just changed that to 6 months, but 6 months still is not a lot of time to understand whether they're right for your business or not. So fundamentally, as leaders within your organisations, you need to really focus on the fact that you recruit the right people. If you haven't heard of this is something called the Carnegie Triangle, and that relates to a study that was done in the US several years ago, which took a sample of about 4,000 businesses, and it broke down in those businesses what was the success criteria that made those individual businesses successful. And they did that by analysing all the people within those organisations. And they found lots of attributes to that, but they narrowed it down into 3 key areas. And that was the knowledge that these people had, the skills that they demonstrated, and ultimately the attitude that those people showed within that environment. So not only do you need the right skills and abilities within your organization, but that mindset and that ability to drive the business forward was absolutely key. Are they the right fit for your organization? And that has got nothing to do with knowledge and skills. Interestingly, when they took the information to the next level, what they identified was that only 5% of that evidence was related to the knowledge of those people. Only 10% was related to their skills, but 85% of the success of those people and those organizations was because they had the right attitude in there. So think about the last time that you recruited an individual and think about how much time you spent in the interview process, on the job description, on the advert, how much relates to knowledge and skill and how much relates to testing attitude. What's really key here is you are going to need to focus on skill because you need the qualified nurses, right? So that's the tick. They've got the qualification. That's the tick. What you then need to do is how do they apply that? And that's what you should test. Can you test it? Well, you can test it through lots of different ways, which I'll share in a minute. But here's a list of all of the different attitudes that they saw within the testing pool, which was a big pool of people, of businesses, 4,000 different businesses, small and large. These were all the attitudes that those individuals were demonstrating on a regular basis. And as I said there, can you test it? You can do things like DISC. That tests it. You can do an EQ test. There's another test called Hogan Personality Inventory. And that's probably heavy lifting for you guys out there if you're recruiting a receptionist. So you can test it through the interview process. You can use areas like behavioural questions. Tell me about a time you received difficult feedback and how did you respond? You can ask value-based questions. You can ask situational questions, etc. So here's just a couple of examples. I have a whole list of these. So if anybody wants to drop me an email, I'm happy to send you more detail on this. But really start to think about how can you get under the top level questioning and dig in underneath about what type of individual am I recruiting here? Will they be a good fit for the organisation? What will be their attitude? You can also bring them in for some couple of hours, meet the team and assess through areas like that, which I know many of you will probably already do. Okay, and the next one is leading through change. Now, you're about to go through the largest change program that the industry has probably faced, again, in our lifetime, which is the CMA changes that they're bringing in. But the customer is changing. The personalization of pets is changing. The way that we treat an animal today is different to the way that we treated an animal 15 years ago. And the way that people access your services and the way that you diagnose illness is different to when I was in Linnaeus, right? So that's changing every day. And your job is to make sure that you lead that change. You can accept change, but do you lead it and make sure you harness it and embed that within your organization for success? And one of the areas of that is make sure you don't do too much change at one time, right? You plan it. But I've got for you here something called the Gleischer's formula. And this helps people to understand and navigate how to implement that change in a really successful way. For those that love maths, this is not a mathematical equation. This was created by a study led by a guy called David Gleischer, and you can read this in one of his change books. And it looked at organizational change. How do you impact organizational change in a effective way? And the first one here is don't make change for change's sake and don't do too much change. And when you just decide on your change, you can use this formula here, which is D times V times FS is greater than R. So the first one stands for dissatisfaction. If it's working, that old saying, don't break it. But if you have got an area that you want to change, there must be a level of dissatisfaction for that process, procedure, piece of equipment, system. There must be an element of dissatisfaction. If there's not, it's going to be very difficult to land that change within the organisation. So there must be an element of dissatisfaction. On top of that, there must be a very clear vision about what you want to change. That needs to be very clear about this is why we're unhappy today, and this is where we want to change to. This is what good will look like. So people can see and feel what the difference will be like once the change has been embedded. You then need to have a very clear plan of how you're going to make that change and start to make those first steps. Again, so people can go on that journey with you, on that change journey to make that, to achieve that vision. The difficulty here is that sometimes change is done, you get to the first steps and it falls over, and you go back to the original equipment or system or process because it didn't work for one person. So it's really important here there's a robust plan in the change that you're going to do. And all of that needs to be greater than the resistance. So if the change that you've decided to do, it allows you to achieve those first three areas, then your resistance will be very small because people will be very clear that this is going to make their lives better and it's for the good of patients, pets, etc. So that's just a whistle-stop tour on the Gleicher's formula. Hopefully you'll find that useful for when you implement change, especially with the AI technology heading your way fast. So that's everything from me. I think we're just slightly over in time. Apologies, that was quick. Thank you for joining me today. Any questions here that you'd like to put on the chat? Thank you very much. This will be shared. You'll be able to share it with the rest of your team if you found it useful. And hope to see you for... somebody says, can you go into some detail on psychological safety? I can do that. You've actually got a session coming on that in January. One thing about culture and psychological safety, it starts with one word, and that is trust. Do your teams trust you? Psychological safety is created when they believe that whatever they say, they trust you to handle it in the right way. So if you spend some time working on how you create trust, if you don't feel that you have that at the moment, that comes with areas like confidentiality, open conversations, just listening to people and not judging or giving the answer straight away. It's really important. This takes time. Creating psychological safety creates time, and it needs nurturing once you've got it there. So, but psychological safety will be covered in quite a bit of detail in next month's webinar. Great. Thank you very much. Have an amazing afternoon, everyone. Thank you. See you.